Hello, and thank you for your interest in this presentation. I am Jeff Demansky, and I'm here with Glenn Weinberg from Jewel Community Power, and we are the two leads of the administration team of the Hudson Valley Community Power Partnership. Hudson Valley Community Power Partnership is a partnership of 10 communities which came together to participate in a community choice aggregation program which launched in the middle of 2019. These communities are, in the order of the logos shown in the lower left, Phillipstown, the City of Beacon, the Village of Cold Spring, the Town of New Paltz, the Village of New Paltz, the Town of Red Hook, the Town of Clinton, the City of Poughkeepsie, the Town of Fishkill, and Marbletown. The program partners are shown in the lower right of the slide, including Jewel Community Power, that's Glenn's organization, Hudson Valley Energy, that's my organization, and together, this partnership selected the third logo in the program partners section, which is the orange logo for Direct Energy. And they are the supplier through the remainder of the 2-year program that started in the middle of 2019. So Direct Energy is the supplier until about the end of June of 2021. Also shown in the program partner section is the logo for Central Hudson. And I'd like to include that just to emphasize that this is a program that does not replace Central Hudson in terms of its delivery service. This is a program that works alongside the delivery services and the billing service and the repair service that Central Hudson provides. Now, in the right of the slide, there is some information if you want to learn more about the program that we're going to talk about. There's lots of good information on the partnership website, which is hudsonvalleycommunitypower.com. And underneath it, some links or some identifiers for the social media channels that we use to share information about the program as well. Now, this program is an end-of-year progress update, the end of 2020. And we're going to talk about the topics that I show on the next agenda slide. But generally, it is a focus on how we've done in terms of the multiple benefits that derive from being part of a community choice aggregation program. Finally, because this is a recorded presentation, you can't ask us questions right away, but we want to make sure that you have contact information so you can contact us and ask us questions that you might have about the content of the presentation or other thoughts or questions you might have on your mind. So I've put now in the middle of the slides my email and our program helpline number and Glenn's email and his phone number. So you can contact either one of us. And again, there's lots of good information if you want to go to the program partnership website. Jumping to the agenda, these are the topics that we're going to cover today. We're going to start out in the program highlights and overview section with an overview of the basics of the program. And Glenn, I'm going to hand it over to Glenn to do that. That will also include highlights of the program, some overview topics, and some roll-up information about how we're doing with the program. And we'll also talk about who we are in that section as well, and included in the basic information. So there's an updated understanding of what the program team is, who it's comprised of and what we do. Then we'll talk about the partner communities and provide information about who Jewel is working with broadly within the state, and also a focus on the Hudson Valley programs. And then we'll dig into the third topic on the agenda, the program performance. That'll be a deeper dive into metrics and details about how the program is doing and some projection forward. We'll talk about what it looks like in the upcoming marketplace for these programs. Included in these topics so far that I talked about, we will also, in addition to talking about how we've done on the program, share some updated information about what is available and how this program has evolved for some new opportunities to be mindful of. And we're very much going to talk about the idea that this program can be repeated, as many of you know. We're coming to the last quarter of a 2-year program. And so we're going to talk about what is on the horizon for next steps, and not so far distant horizon 2. So there's lots of good updated information to be mindful of, including a review of the fourth topic, community solar. where there are some very exciting developments that will be a focus of our conversation tonight, of what we present. Then we're going to leave off on talking about the next steps, one slide, and we'll revisit contact information too, so you know how to get in touch with us. But the next steps will identify those specific opportunities and required steps for moving forward with a new version of the program and integrating more fully into the program for the value proposition about how there is opportunities to expand what this program can be for your communities. So now I'm going to hand it over to Glenn to start talking about this more basic information so that we're all on the same page as we move forward into some more detailed information. Glenn?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So I'm Glenn Weinberg. I'm with Jewel Community Power. We're the program administrator for the Hudson Valley Community Power program. And as Jeff mentioned, this is a program that rests on the regulatory authority known as community choice aggregation. This is a state policy which allows municipalities in New York State, cities, towns, and villages to source their own default energy, to choose sources, and to identify terms and priorities that they have for their energy mix, including price and renewable content as well, for both electricity, natural gas, and the new component of this authority, which we will talk in greater depth later on about, is the ability to integrate community solar and other community distributed generation projects into the default offering. So for the first contract, which Jeff mentioned is coming up at the end of June, we focused on 100% New York State renewal electricity. And we identified sources in New York to serve the customers down here in the Hudson Valley. Going forward, we'll be able to be even more local and more focused in terms of the way that we source our clean energy sources and partner with local project developers here in the Hudson Valley that are in development of community solar projects, which have additional benefits, including guaranteed savings for customers. So the program really is now comprised of two central components: one, electricity supply, and the other, community solar. On the electricity supply side, as you know, this is an opt-out program, meaning that all eligible customers are enrolled unless they choose not to participate, unless they opt out. Opting out is always free and without any penalty whatsoever. It is absolutely each customer's choice whether to participate in the program or not. It is a 100% New York State renewable electricity supply. So it replaces the Central Hudson grid mix, which is primarily nuclear and fossil based, with a 100% renewable default electricity supply for all residents. And it is a fixed rate. It is a low fixed rate that stays the same in every month. So even if there are peaks in the market prices for electricity, often in the summer or in the winter due to weather-related demand spikes, the CCA rate remains fixed in every month of the 24-month contract. Community solar. Now, many of you have already engaged with community solar with us and know of community solar because of projects being built in the area and other providers soliciting customers and looking for sites and maybe even coming to your boards trying to get permits, etc. To date, we have offered this opportunity to Hudson Valley Community Power customers on an opt-in or voluntary basis. Looking forward, our expectation is that we're going to be able to offer this on an opt-out basis. So just as we do with electricity supply, the community solar can be included in part and parcel of the default offering to customers. Again, it supports local development of clean energy, and it's a guaranteed savings of up to 10% off your annual electricity bill. So it's a really powerful tool, and in combination with the 100% renewable supply, It offers the best of both worlds. These components, these programs, they are not. They are additive to one another. They do not compete with one another. One does not replace the other, and customers can take advantage of both and see the benefits of both additively. In addition, as a reward for the community's participation in the community solar projects, there is additional funding available, which we have created a sustainability funds. We'll talk more about the details of these funds later on. But for each community that has participated with us, they've had the opportunity to access funding and identify a sustainability project or initiative of their choice. So we'll talk a little bit more about the results of those campaigns later on. So in terms of highlights of the program to date, we serve about 25,000 households, and we've deferred a remarkable 200,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions simply through participation in the CCA and the conversion of the default electricity supply from a fossil-based supply to a renewable supply. We have made a tremendous impact environmentally here in the Hudson Valley. The program has come at about a $5.50 additional cost per household per month, largely due to the economic downturn and the market downturn due to COVID and other factors. But we expect, looking forward, as we move into the second contract and market rates remain low, we expect to be able to fix the electricity rate for the next 2 years at a very competitive rate, and even come at a savings against what the Central Hudson rate will be for the coming 2 years, even with the 100% renewable supply. And we have had consistent engagement, more than 7,000 interactions with your residents, both phone and email, and all sorts of meetings that we and Jeff and his team have done over the course of the 2 years. It remains a living, breathing program, and customers still are coming to us asking questions, looking for information, looking to better understand their electricity supply and their bill. And Jeff will talk more a little later about new opportunities that he and his team have developed to educate customers about how to better understand their bill, especially, and where their electricity comes from. We've had really great participation in the community solar program to date. We've supported 9 community solar projects here in the Hudson Valley, and we will continue to support even more as we move forward into an opt-out construct. So again, the 2 things to focus on throughout this presentation: action items for you as the community. We are coming up in about 5 months now on the expiration of the first contract and the first renewal. So that process starts now. We'll ask you to invite us to present and ultimately to approve a resolution to go forward with the next contract. And we'll talk more about the outlook for that, as well as the precise steps involved. And again, the really exciting evolution here is that the program has grown in terms of the impact it can have on the community. So beyond the sourcing of 100% renewable supply from sources around New York State, mostly hydro and some wind, we now have the additional opportunity to integrate directly into that default offering a community solar subscription for every participating resident, which comes with guaranteed savings. So with that, go for it, Jeff, to talk more about the program updates.
Yeah, so I'm going to dive in a little bit further on the electricity supply portion of what you highlighted. And this slide looks very similar to the last slide, but just the same format, but some repeat of information, but a little deeper dive just to focus on the electricity supply side of the CCA program. And here on this slide, the 3 sections are talking about the environmental benefits of the electricity supply portion of CCA, and then about the program rates benefit, the economics of it, and then very importantly, the customer protection aspect of the program, which there are numerous. But the highlights here, the updates. Again, Glenn talked about for the environmental benefits that we are serving about 25,000 households here in the Hudson Valley with 100% renewable electricity. And he mentioned the 200,000 metric tons of avoided greenhouse gas emissions. Put another way, this is the equivalent of removing 41,000 cars from Hudson Valley highways and roads. I'll dig in a little deeper on some upcoming slides with charts about the benefit, the environmental benefit on a community by community basis. On the program rates updates, this again, as Glenn emphasized, these are competitive with non-renewable utility rates. That's the idea of the program. That's the win-win scenario that we seek. And our rates have remained competitive. And certainly, as shown in the second bullet, as we highlight here, these rates are definitely less than what individual customers could obtain for a comparable 100% renewable supply rate. And I'll show this on a graph coming up too, a comparison of rates, including how we've done, showing you the rate comparison to the variable rate that Central Hudson is charged over the life of our program. All this, of course, is built on a platform of consumer protection, protecting your community members from a lot of vagaries that have happened in the energy supply marketplace. Our program, in essence, is structured to be a simple, relatively simple opportunity for people to take advantage of what's happening in the energy marketplace, in that it is a fixed supply rate for the duration of the program that does not turn variable. It is a fixed period program. We've talked about that there's a 2-year contract that we've been working on, and that is intent to make sure that people are not stuck in endless contracts. The individuals are not in a contract. As the community leaders know, this is a contract that exists at their level. So every member of the community has no contract, no restrictions on participation. So though it is this has been an opt-out program, they can opt out at any time with no fees, no restrictions whatsoever. There is team support for this. And this is, of course, what I love about the program. And that is my team that is there for the ongoing education available every day in multiple ways. And we'll highlight that going on. But that is so essential just to make sure that there are multiple pieces of the program. And we want to make sure that we're providing a way for people to feel comfortable or an easy access point so that they can understand what's going on and to not participate if they don't want to. And we'll talk about participation rates coming up. So here's a bit of a deeper dive into the environmental performance of the program. What I show on this chart are the avoided emissions from the residential and commercial electricity use from the commercial and residential sectors in metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions that are stemming from the members of each community. And I'm showing the first 6 communities that started our program in the middle of 2019. So the members of each community that were in the 100% renewable supply rate through the community choice aggregation to the electricity supply portion of the CCA program. The data for this chart was derived from a few sources, and I show those sources in the footnote down there, which we combined to produce the information that we wanted to look at, to do as much as possible an apples to apples comparison. So just focusing on the residential and commercial electricity consumption and the greenhouse gas emissions data. And we used 2010 data from a 2012 report that the state produced for each community with the data that we had from consumption through our CCA program. And we used an EPA site for conversions. And it shows the significance. The green bar, for example, of the green portion of the bar for Beacon shows that of a total of about 20, if you add those numbers together, it's more than 26,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions. Of that 26 approximately 1,000 tons, 12,505 metric tons were avoided by community members in Beacon being part of the CCA program. So the brownish part of the bar at the top shows what is remaining from electricity emissions for the residential and commercial sectors. So the brown bars in all these charts show more work to be done or more opportunity for avoided emissions, while the green bars show the significance of the benefit that's been there. So for Beacon, almost 50%. Cold Spring, really significant relative portion. And again, multiple data sources come together. So maybe it's a little optimistic in what it presents in terms of the relative percentage of benefit for example, Cold Spring and Marbletown and Phillipstown. But these are very, ballpark, but still good representations of the impact of the program in terms of moving us on a community by community basis towards addressing the broader state goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So now looking at the community solar highlights, what have we done for community solar? And Glenn mentioned, and I show on this map on the right, the 9 solar fields, including those 2 red dots that are up in Westerlo, which are off this this portion of the map. But the red dots are the Central Hudson Territory community solar projects, and the orange dot is the one in Orange and Rockland Territory. And we'll talk about how we're working with Orange and Rockland communities, including those shown in orange in the bottom of the map. But these are the ones that were catalyzed, that we helped significantly contribute by encouraging enrollment by community members that are part of our partner communities to be part of the program. And through this, we've raised funds through the dual sustainability and COVID relief funds. Basically, a portioning of the funds that they have from the program to sustainability purposes within the communities. And so, with the 843 enrollments, $42,000 were raised for sustainability funds. And I'll talk about in detail towards the end of the presentation how each community, how much they raised and how they're using those funds for those that have identified uses. And over $5,000 for COVID relief campaign efforts, going to organizations on the front lines of supporting families in need during the COVID pandemic impacts. So looking forward a little bit, but giving you, I hope, some very important context to consider here in terms of environmental benefits. Very important to know that community choice aggregation is part of, and community solar, particularly the opt-out community solar that Glenn talked about. So both the electricity supply and opt-out community solar are 2 very powerful parts of an updated New York State program. The program is called the Clean Energy Communities Program, and many of you have heard about it. It's been around since about 2016. It launched in the state. And in a nutshell, there were 10 high impact actions that were identified in that original launch of the program. And if any community did 4 of those 10 actions, they accessed grants to use for other energy projects. Wonderfully, and particularly here in the Hudson Valley, those grants were used pretty quickly by very aggressive communities. So it was really wonderful. NYSERDA recharged the program, reshaped the program to move forward, what they're calling a leadership round. And they just announced this program on the 26th of January, the new version of the program. CCA and community solar remain the highest impact actions in that list of actions that could be done. And they get you more than halfway there, as CCA communities that have done these strategies. And if you do opt out community solar, you get more than half the points you need to access the first level of grants, tens of thousands of dollars to be used for energy projects. So this is a NYSERDA program, and I've included down below the link for the program website. So that is an overview of the performance to date, but also a look forward. I'm going to pass it back to Glenn to just revisit again, just to make sure everyone understands who the administration team is. And Glenn, I want you to take it away.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, Jewel Community Power, we're the program administrator, and really our job is to, really our combined job, both Jewel and Hudson Valley Energy, is to manage the process from A to Z, to take what can be a fairly complex and labor-intensive process, to interface with all sorts of different stakeholders, manage the regulatory process, manage the data acquisition and the data security process with Central Hudson, and manage the procurement process with suppliers, including encouraging participation from the suppliers, promoting competition, making sure we're getting the best deal, making sure we're getting the most protective customer protective contract, and then enforcing that contract to make sure the suppliers are living up to it. All of that so that the municipality, so that you don't have to. This is ultimately a municipal program. New York State has set it up such that you as the municipal officials and the municipal decision makers have the ultimate decision and the authority and the responsibility for the program. But the program administrator is a position that has been created by New York State, which essentially carves out a role for a consultant like us, like Jewel Community Power and like Hudson Valley Energy, to act as a representative or as an agent of the municipality throughout the process. And again, our job is to take this work off of your plate and to manage all of these moving parts. And the one big piece of that, which I haven't yet covered, and really speaks to the partnership between Jewel and Hudson Valley Energy, is the job of educating and informing your community. So all of the outreach activities, all of the events, the promotions, the informational materials that we've distributed, the social media posts, all of that is an ongoing effort, not just when we launch the program or when we're getting ready to renew like we are this year, but all the time throughout the year and throughout the duration of the contract. It's our job to be out in the community, to be a consistent presence, to be answering all of the customer questions, and to be a trusted source of energy education and information, and a durable one. And that's really where Jeff and his team come in. Hudson Valley Energy is that local arm. They are the boots on the ground. They manage, Jeff and his team manages a hotline, a call center that operates Monday through Friday, all normal business hours, and you can often get them on the weekend too. Not that I'm advocating you call Jeff at home on the weekend, but they are tirelessly, present and working to respond to all of the questions that they receive, which are in the thousands, by phone and by email and all other means. And that's their job, is to make sure people are well informed about what's going on. And Jeff, I should mention, Jeff, he's not just a voice on the other end of the phone. Jeff is an energy expert and a sustainability expert, and has been in various forms, various facets of sustainability here in the Hudson Valley for decades. So when you call the program hotline, you're getting a real expert on the other end of the phone. And that's something we really pride ourselves on, that this program, that there's a lot of complexities and there's a lot to understand about how electricity markets work and how your electricity bill works. And the most important thing that we can do for the community is to be accurate, factual, and knowledgeable when they come to us with questions. So that's really the sort of the administration partnership and how it breaks down in terms of our roles. We can move on here. So next we'll zoom out a little bit and we'll talk about kind of CCA in New York, and also the communities, the update on the communities here in the Hudson Valley. So first, CCA, I've been working on CCA in New York State since really before there was CCA in New York State. And the pilot program was a group of 20 communities in Westchester County. That program launched in May of 2016. It has since grown from 20 to 28 communities and continues to grow and evolve and introduce new value adds for customers. And really that was I worked on that program for about 18 months, and I was the program director when we launched. And really that program was the sort of sandbox upon which the rest of the or CCA in New York State has evolved out of. So when you see that kind of ant farm effect downstate here in Westchester, and then up into the Hudson Valley where our program is, this is really the home of CCA in New York, and not just CCA in New York, but clean energy focused CCA programs. They're really the flagship programs for New York State. Both Westchester Power and Hudson Valley Community Power have set the precedent for the rest of the state to demonstrate how CCA can be a powerful tool for accessing low-cost clean energy for communities. And since then, it's spread. So we were the early adopters down here, but it has spread throughout the state, all the way into the northern Adirondacks, all the way over to Buffalo, and on the east end of Long Island, and everywhere in between. There's more than 130 communities to date that have passed the CCA local law. So it's a growing movement around the state. In terms of who we're working with at Joule, and even there's a few more to add to this slide now because we're growing all the time. We have communities coming on board with us all the time, but we represent, I believe it's more than 30, I believe it's 31 or 32 municipalities in the state, representing more than 300,000 households and small businesses. So the power and numbers of community choice aggregation is really growing. And the 10 participating communities in the Hudson Valley Community Power Program are up there on the top, but your group is growing too. The village of Nelsonville, the town of Gardner, and others are coming on board and will join you in your renewal effort as we go out back to bid this spring. So we'll even have a bigger group and a more market power to command leverage in the market. And I should also point out an additional program here in the Hudson Valley on the other side of the river. 6 communities in Rockland County have recently launched their program as of November 2020 with us. That's that third row, Clarkstown and Orangetown, Village of Nyack and others. Another 100% New York State, 5 out of the 6 are a 100% New York State renewable default. And they're just getting going on their 2-year contract and integrating community solar. So they're following in your footsteps.
So I think we're going to dive in now with a focus on our Hudson Valley Community Power Partner communities, Glenn. I think we're going to dig in a little deeper dive in the upcoming slides in terms of program performance. But before we do, again, just revisiting those next steps for the contract renewal. Let me have you talk about that here.
Sure, yeah. So again, as we move towards renewal, we'll go through the same process that we went through the first time. So in terms of procurement. So we want you to have us come in at your next board meeting and talk a little bit more about the program, about the process, and really a customized presentation for how the program has performed in your community in terms of enrollments, environmental benefits, community solar progress, etc. We'll present to you a specialized presentation and a short presentation. It won't be as comprehensive as this recording is. It'll be a 10 or 15-minute presentation where we will review the program and talk about the process going forward. At that presentation, we will talk to you about and ask you to pass a resolution, which is a confirmation of moving forward with the program into the next phase. So it's just a board resolution. It's not a new local law. There's no new agreement to sign yet. There will be, if we're successful in finding you a contract that you like. But at this stage, it's just a renewal resolution that gives us the go-ahead to put out for bid again on your behalf. We're looking to do that. We're looking to get those resolutions all wrapped up by the middle of March, so in the next month and a half or so, and put the RFP out. And award that RFP in April, with giving us plenty of time to run another opt-out period. We'll send out another batch of letters if to residents, and enroll everybody in time to pick up right where the first contract left off. So July 1st, 2021, the new contract will take effect with a new rate, and we expect that the rate will be even lower this time for 100% renewable electricity, and we will move forward again with a fixed rate for another 2 years or maybe even longer.
All right, cool. Thanks, Glenn. And now this is a time to press pause and take a break if you want to, before we go even deeper into some detail. But that's really good information in terms of the highlights and overviews and how we're doing specifically with our program partners. But I'm going to take us a little bit deeper, just a fair warning for your minds here, into our program performance, some details on a community by community basis. But it's also going to include some really good information that Glenn will share too, as well, in terms of what the forward market looks like for the energy marketplace. The reason we're so excited and encouraging you to engage in the process of the renewal. So stepping deeper into some community by community stats. And one thing I should have mentioned when I was talking about the bar charts in terms of environmental performance, the data showed for the first 6 communities that were part of our program. And you can see the first 6 communities on this chart in terms of the participation. Beacon and Cold Spring, Fishkill, Marbletown, Phillipstown, and the city of Poughkeepsie all started in July 2019. And wonderfully, we were able to add, because of the condition of the market and the willingness of the supplier at the time, 4 additional communities to the program, which brought us up to 10. I did not include on that bar chart the town and village of New Paltz and the town of Red Hook and Clinton, but we have that data as well. And that will be part of the data that we present to each community when we get to speak to the upcoming board or council or trustee meeting. We'll have that data to share with you, and certainly happy to share it with you remotely by email. So looking at the participation rates that's shown in the rest of this chart. So what we show in the third column are the numbers of participants, meters, residential or commercial meters that were part of our program at the program start, each of their start dates. And then in the fourth column, it's in the numbers of meters, participants as of October 2020, when we took a snapshot of data. And then the last column shows an attrition rate, or in every case, a reduction. And this emphasizes, the story shows that there was reduction in numbers of participants in every community. And it speaks to the power of the program, the ability for customers to do this, to opt out of the program at when they wanted to. And there was, we talked about the economic performance of the data of the program compared to the utility rates, because we lived through unusual times. And I'm going to share that specifically on a chart on the next slide. But it's because of some of the challenges we had economically of the program that we did not we were not surprised to see that there was an attrition rate by customers taking advantage of the freedom that they had to opt out of the program. And so that's reflected in these numbers. So how did we look in terms of performance? This is another detailed chart, but what we're showing here are 4 different rates for different opportunities for utility customers here in the Hudson Valley. Starting at the top, these are rates in cents per kilowatt hour, and this shows the time period from the launch of our program with the 6 original communities in July 2019, all the way through the latest published rates for Central Hudson in January 2021. And the red line, the straight red line at the top, shows the average of rates which customers could obtain as individual customers entering into a contract with an energy service company or an ESCO. So that's what individual customers shopping, taking advantage of the open marketplace. That's pretty much the rate that they could expect, and it shows that it's the highest number up there. That's at 7.5 cents per kilowatt hour. The yellow line, the higher line of those 2 that are close together, is our program's 100% renewable fixed rate. So that's at 6.36 cents per kilowatt hour. So that is our fixed rate for the duration of the program. While the blue line, is the second option, the standard rate, which was the non-default option in all of our communities. That mirrors the mix of sources that Central Hudson typically provides on its monthly basis. Now, the green line is Central Hudson's monthly variable rate, what the published rate was for each month. And it's hills and valleys and ups and downs. And you could see that when the program started in July 2019, our program rates were just slightly higher than Central Hudson's rates. And then in the second month of the program, as happens with seasonal variation, we expected rates to go up in the hot summer months and the cold winter months when electricity consumption goes up. The program rate did indeed go above our rates. But then there was a dip that happened in the fall of 2019, which reflected, as Glenn will talk about as well, that there was an unexpectedly mild winter preceding this, and an excess of gas in the marketplace, which unexpectedly dipped those rates down below our program rates. But after that 2-month dip, there was an increase, reflecting again the seasonal variation of increases in the coldest winter months that brought the program rates right into competition with the variable rates from Central Hudson. And then right up, in the spring of 2020 up until April, when the utility rate went above our rate. And the marketplace had anticipations, as Glenn will talk about on the next slide, that there would be relative normalcy, and our program would have done well against the utility rates. But then something called the COVID pandemic happened right there in the March-April time period, and you can see that impact on the economy and on utility rates with that significant drop down in May of 2020. And then, but after that drop, there was a return to kind of normal variation of an increase in rates in the summer. Again, high cooling period, high electric use, and then a dip in the fall, but then increasing rates in the winter. Without the pandemic shift, if you shifted those May 2020 through January 2021 rates up without that pandemic shock, I think we would have been doing great, break even or even better versus Central Hudson's rates. But this is the one risk of the electricity supply side of the program, is that the one risk is that we might not do as well as the utility rates, but we leave off on a hopeful side. And I think there is generally hope and some optimism for the economy moving forward, and it's reflected in utility rates that right there, January 21, the rate is right between our program rates. And so this is something we maintain and have shared with lots of customers and municipal leaders, so that we're keeping tabs and keeping honest account of how we're doing as a program. But it is definitely worth sticking around for this next slide for detail that Glenn will go into in terms of how the forwards are looking in the electricity and energy marketplace.
Yes, this is in support of the story Jeff just told, taking us through the program sort of month to month. These are the forwards, so not the price for electricity at the time that is listed on the title row there, but rather what you could buy forward-looking energy for on the time frame listed on the left-hand column. So the story that this tells us is that at the time that we awarded our bid in the spring of 2019, prices these are normal sort of typical prices. They look high when you look at the rest of this chart, but sort of $40 a megawatt hour, all the way up to $46 a megawatt hour for 2022 block. What this tells us is that nobody saw this market downturn coming. So at the time that we went out to bid and priced that energy, everybody was looking still very bullish, so to speak, on the forward market for electricity for the next 3 years. The oversupply of gas, coupled with that mild winter that Jeff mentioned, that's when we started to see this market correction, and we started to see prices go down. So much so that in the fall and into the winter of 2020, we saw some historic lows, both for natural gas and electricity rates here in the Hudson Valley. But as Jeff mentioned, it was coming back. Pre-COVID, we had rates ascending, getting closer to where they had been prior to that market dip. And then COVID took its course, and now we're back down to a sort of, close to those historic lows. But the good news of that is that we get to go out and fix rates again in that market, in this down market, and we get the benefit of these prices now. So as we price, as we procure energy looking forward through the rest of 21 and into 22, we get that benefit of those $30 or $33 prices rather than the $40 or $46 prices. And that's going to be reflected in the bids that come back. So to fix a price at the low end of the market, right, it's all upside for us, meaning that if Central Hudson's rates, if the the pandemic turns around and the economy comes back, and Central Hudson's energy consumption goes back up to typical levels, Central Hudson's rates will follow. But we will lock in at that $30 level, not at the $40 level or the $45 level. And we will be the beneficiary of the market coming back, just as we were a bit of a victim of the market slip that we saw over the last couple of years.
Awesome. Thank you, Glenn. And I hope that you followed that, but we recognize that this is challenging. And so we take a step up in terms of depth, but to emphasize the point that this is what the team is here for. You know, there is a lot of complexity in the energy marketplace. There's a lot of complexity even for understanding your utility bill and understanding the components of the program and how it works. And that's what we're here for, as we've said before. And here's some stats in terms of and information, informational stats about what we're doing in terms of our customer support. You know, we are that ongoing presence and learning opportunities in our partner communities. We mentioned before that we've had more than 7,000 interactions with customers, answering questions, assisting them with components of the program, facilitating conversations with Central Hudson to make sure that they are happy in the end, addressing needs. We had a number of in-person, there were regular weekly in-person office hours that we held. And that's what the snapshot on the right is from one of our flyers for the period when we launched through a majority of the period until the pandemic hit, that we were holding regular office hours in our communities, advertising this so that people always knew where to find us. They could always find us in person and have a conversation, and people took advantage of that. We've switched to a more virtual world, and we continue to have virtual meetings, and we hold webinars, live webinars, and other ways to interact with people. And they continue to be advertised. So if you're not on our list and want to know about those events, please contact us, and we'll put you on the list to know about those meetings. So this is something we're continuing to move forward on. And the topics that we talk about, there are common questions, and we find it's useful just to revisit some of the common questions. And these are the top 6 that we confront, and just to give you a flavor of what we address when we speak to customers. There's a concern that we replace the utility company. The first question in the upper left, and we emphasize no. This is all done for the electricity supply option and what we're transitioning to for opt-out community solar, all done through the utility bill. It's just changes on the bill, and so logistically, it's a very easy lift. When people ask us about why we're doing this, how can you do this, we emphasize that this is a public benefit being delivered by their community leaders on their behalf to give them the best of what the energy marketplace has to offer in a simple package. It's those 3 goals that we talked about, marrying together the potential to bring together, supporting, paying only for renewables from New York State, cost competitively, and in a way that has built many built-in protections for the customer. Will the electricity supply portion of the program save me money? We're always very frank about that. And we've always shared, for example, the performance of our program with the chart that I showed a couple of slides back. It is believed, and you can see when we launched, that there was the anticipation that we would provide a 5 to 10% savings on the supply rate that people would see, but it's not guaranteed. And so we're frank about that, but it is very competitive, though. It's still, if you remember that red line for the individual, it's much better than what individuals could get in the marketplace. So the Costco effect, the buying club effect, is working for the program. The lower left, are people locked into this for the duration? And people are used to the energy marketplace having restrictions and being very customer unfriendly. And we emphasize, no, this is a public benefit that you can take advantage of if you want to, or you can walk away from it if you want to, and you can walk back to it if you want to. So free exit and free entry with no fees, no penalties, nothing that's hidden from our program. The middle bottom question, we get this a lot. What happens after the contract? Does the rate go crazy after this 2-year period? One, it's a fixed rate, and we emphasize that, and we know what this is in response to, where people have been in private contracts that have been variable. They start out fixed and they turn variable and they turn crazy. Part of the consumer protection is the fact that this is a fixed rate for a fixed period. And to do it beyond 2 years, to do it beyond the contract length, it's a repeat, it's a renewal. And that's why we're emphasizing that a lot of benefits are being delivered, and there's really great signs for what these programs will deliver in the coming, the immediate coming years. And so we want to make sure there's understanding about the renewal process. Lastly, the most common question we get is, where does the energy come from? And for the renewable through the program, it's renewable, solar, wind, or hydro. That's the renewable options that we allow through our program. But these are the high-level questions, but we also got a lot of deeper questions and lots of long phone calls and long conversations. And we are responsive to that. And we're thinking always about how to convey information and to make people feel comfortable and to provide resources for them to understand what's happening. And if you want to talk to us more about the energy forwards, the marketplace forwards, we're here for that. But what's represented on this slide, a little bit of a busy slide, are two things that are one we've completed and something in the works. And these are ongoing education opportunities. Hudson Valley Energy, my team, we created with Central Hudson, in partnership with Central Hudson, we created a course, a free course for understanding your utility bill in depth. We have it structured as a beautiful 1-hour presentation, but we also recorded it and it's available for viewing at your leisure in 4 parts on our YouTube page. We are also in the lower right circle near Jules' logo. We are developing a multi-level course about the grid. We're calling it the grid. I think it's a good name, but it's really about understanding the electricity grid. So understanding how renewals get introduced to it, how reliable, who are the stakeholders involved in this? What are people paying for? How do these marketplaces work? There's a lot of questions that people have, and we love being there to answer those questions, and we wanted to create more tools for people to understand what's happening. So please be aware of these and take advantage of these, and I'll be happy to share links if you contact me with the recording sites for the courses, and we'll schedule either live webinars or, once we get back to being able to see each other in person, live presentations for the members of our communities. So now we're going to take a step and focus on community solar. We've talked a lot about the supply marketplace and the detailed dive that we did. Thankfully, it's not a detailed dive on terms of stats for community solar, but some important things to understand about what it's been in terms of benefit for individuals and the communities and what it means going forward. And so what we've often done in our education and outreach efforts is talk to this slide to help people understand the difference between the electricity supply portion of CCA and the solar opportunities that are parallel opportunities. And many of you have probably seen me talk to this slide at our public presentations. And I call this my menu slide. And I make the analogy that this is like a menu in a restaurant where you have the entrees on the right and the appetizers on the left. And you can only pick one appetizer and one entree for your meal. The same applies to these two menus here. On the electricity supply option, there are 3 choices that a utility customer in a CCA community can take advantage of, but only one of them. But they always have all 3 options available to them. None of them are taken away. Those choices are to either go with what is the state default before CCA is electricity supply is launched in a community, where the utility makes the decision for them. Or the second option is the private marketplace. And remember the red line on our chart for the rates. That's the red line option, the third-party supplier option. Or if you are a CCA community, electricity supply option community, you have that as your new default option, which you can reject and take advantage of the other 2. There is a lot of confusion about solar and how it interacts with the electricity supply options. Solar is a parallel choice, and you can mix and match the choices from these 2 menus together in any pattern that you want. But we encourage folks to take advantage of choice 3 and choice C on these menus, combining these electricity supply of community choice aggregation with community solar. But just to clarify, on the solar side, a customer need do nothing about solar. They don't have to do a solar installation. They don't have to subscribe to community solar. They can just leave as is. Or, as many people have done, they could choose to install a solar system on their home or business. If they have not done that, they can subscribe to community solar and take advantage of the programs that we're doing. And this applies to what we've been doing in terms of opt-in, where we've encouraged people to opt in to community solar. But with the good changes that are taking place here in Central Hudson Territory, the opt-out choice is becoming available. But what it's looked like within the communities in terms of the opt-in, it's been fun. It's been really great to partner with the communities who recognize that combining the two bottom menu choice options, the supply option through the CCA program and community solar, just brings additional kind of no-brainer benefits to their community members. We've had a lot of fun working with community leaders and doing outreach, and that's the special sauce of this program. And so shown on this slide is some of the materials that we developed with Supervisor Oberly in the town of Clinton, who was the last community to join our partnership here in the Hudson Valley Community Power partnership. And this is part of the flyer, and the quote that was included with him was on another section of the flyer. And this was a package sent out to everyone when the program launched, and a follow-up afterwards too, to make sure people understood what the opportunities were, how they differed, and what they needed to do. So Glenn talked about before too, and we mentioned, and I spoke to, the sustainability funds and the COVID relief funds that Jewel decided wonderfully was an important part of the program, a way to give back to the communities, to bring benefit to the communities. And so what's shown on this slide is for the 10 communities, the different programs that were designated, identified by the communities in partnership with Jewel for the use of those funds. So for each of our communities, we show the number of community members that enrolled, opted in to community solar, and the resulting, from the $50 per enrollment, the amount of money that Jewel gave to the communities for these purposes. And for a number of the communities, it was a really fun process for them to decide how to use the funds. For example, a number of the communities had designated projects in mind. Some couldn't decide among the good project opportunities that were kicking around in terms of supporting sustainability. For example, in the city of Beacon, there was a vote. They put it out to the citizens over about a 1-month period to vote on 4 different project options. And there was a clear winner in that the citizens, quite a few voted and decided that the funds should go to the Beacon City School District to support sustainability efforts in the Beacon City School District. And so that's where the more than $10,000 dedicated to the Beacon from Jewel is going. And you can see the other amounts raised. Town of Marbletown, for example, for its dedication to a walk and bike project. But Marbletown also shifted gears when the pandemic came and decided to divert those funds to COVID relief, to the Rondout Valley Food Pantry. So 2,100 raised for that. New Paltz similarly did a COVID campaign, raised more than $3,000 to give to the family of New Paltz to help families in need. And then the village raised $2,300, and they're still determining what to do with the program. Town of Phillipstown raised $7,600 and they're going to use it for their refrigerant management program. But these funds are held in reserve for those communities that have not yet determined how to spend those dollars. But it'll be a fun process, helping them or just watching what they decide to spend the money on. And then it's also a beautiful opportunity for celebration, the community engagement and celebration. So here's a snapshot of a big check event with Mike Gordon from Jewel presenting the check to the family of New Paltz organization. And then there's a picture from New Paltz where we're given the funds for both the COVID relief and for the walk and bike project that they were doing. Here's a snapshot of the Beacon High School in the upper part of this image. And then there's an image of a trail that's going to be probably one of the resultant beneficiaries of the Marbletown project. And here's showing rooftop air units, air conditioning units, which is part of the refrigerant management program that Phillipstown is designed, a great program. And if anybody wants to know more about these programs, we have some good information on them, but we're glad to connect you to the other communities. That's another beautiful element of our program, is serving as a connector between the communities for good knowledge sharing. Now I'm going to pass it back to Glenn to take this conversation about community solar forward for what's coming and what's what they've been working on and what the new opportunities are. So Glenn?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So you can see the impact that integrating community solar into your CCA program can have on communities. both the residents and also the community at large through the sustainability funding. So when you integrate, though, on an opt-out basis, your community solar in with your electricity supply, the impact scales by an order of magnitude. So while maybe 5% of a community or 10% of a community may sign up voluntarily for community solar through the opt-in model, you might get 90% or 80% of the community signed up to community solar through opt-out, and that really is the power, speaks to the power of CCA broadly, and also just the collective community action through the leadership of the community. So this is the same authority. It's leveraging the same authority that is that you've authorized yourself with through your local law, through your CCA local law that you passed several years ago. There, as I mentioned earlier, there is no need for additional legislation. You already have the authority to do it. The only reason it hasn't been available until now has been largely regulatory and market barriers that have prevented the viable implementation of community solar on an opt-out basis. So what are those? So previously, you've had to, and you can move to the next slide, Jeff. Previously, if you signed up for community solar, you had to sign a contract. And this is a barrier. The contracts are typically fairly standard, and there's not a whole lot of poison pills in there for customers. It's a guaranteed savings, but it is a contract, and that is burdensome for most people to feel like they are signing a document that they may not understand, with potential risks in there that they don't fully they haven't fully internalized. With an opt-out model through CCA, there is no individual contracts. Just with an electricity supply, the municipality authorizes the enrollment of their community members through a master contract, but there is no any undue legal burden that trickles down to the consumer. The consumer enjoys the benefits without having to take any active steps or sign any contract. There's no second bill. So to date, community solar has operated in the sense where the utility, Central Hudson, places credits on your bill, which are in the value of the solar power produced in your name associated with your subscription. So you get a big credit on your Central Hudson bill, and then the solar farm sends you a second invoice, which you then pay directly to the solar farm. And when you cobble those two bills together, you can see you've saved some money, but it is a gap. In other words, it does place the impetus on the customer to then put those two bills together and understand that they've saved money. So it works, and it does mean a reduction in the overall energy spend, but it does take some additional focus and attention of the customer. The idea here is to keep it all very simple. So with the introduction of what's called utility consolidated billing, which was introduced in National Grid in the fall of 2020, and will be introduced in the other utility service territories, including Central Hudson, in the coming months here in 2021, all of that, both the charges and the credits, will be netted out right there on the same utility bill. So the customer pays one bill. They see precisely how much they've saved. It's a line item on the bill. It's a negative number, so it stands out amongst the other charges and fees as a discount, and they can see in plain dollars and cents how much they've saved every month. In addition, they're not paying anything to the solar farm. It's Central Hudson, it's the utility that then owes the solar farm the value of that power, which they've essentially purchased on the customer's behalf. And perhaps most importantly, there's no credit barrier, there's no credit check, there's no FICO score minimum, or any of the other um, barriers that have previously excluded some low and moderate income residents from being able to enjoy the benefits of community solar. So while it's a guaranteed savings program, a lot of the most in need of those of that electricity bill relief have been precluded from participating, which is really, of course, counterintuitive and antithetical to what New York State is trying to do. With CCA, CCA provides that consumer protection layer and provides equitable and universal access for all eligible customers in the community to participate and get that guaranteed savings without the legal risk and without the responsibility of paying a separate bill. So we are launching this for communities in upstate New York. Now we're in the process of launching our first program of opt-out community solar within a CCA. We are piloting this in National Grid territory because, as I mentioned, National Grid is the first utility in New York State to offer consolidated utility billing for community solar. But we expect this to be available in all other parts of the state within a couple months. And we will be going back to the regulators and asking for permission to expand this model beyond National Grid territory across the state for all of our CCA municipalities, including, of course, the Hudson Valley Community Power Program. So how do you integrate? How do you make opt-out community solar a part of your existing CCA? You pass a resolution. It's a simple resolution. Again, there's no new law. There is no additional approval steps that we'll ask you to take other than that same resolution will ask you to pass renewal. So it'll be a renewal resolution that will also include your intent to participate in community solar. Marbletown was the first community outside of National Grid territory to pass one of these resolutions of intent. They passed it on the 19th of January. So they've taken that step, but that is open. That same opportunity is open to all members of the Hudson Valley Community Power program equally. And we'll be coming, as I said, as you have us come in to talk to you more about this and answer your questions directly at your next board meeting, we'll be able to walk through precisely the composition and content of that resolution. And it is, again, a non-binding resolution in the sense that it authorizes Jewel to explore the opportunity on your behalf, but you still have the ultimate decision-making power. So in terms of process, it's essentially a parallel procurement process. It'll work very much the same, but we'll issue a separate RFP. We'll issue an RFP for electricity supply, and in parallel, an RFP for community solar. Of course, there's two different groups of respondents, ESCOs on one side and community solar developers on the other, but it'll look very much the same. We will manage that bidding process. We will collect the bids. We will analyze and evaluate the bids and then come back to you with a recommendation. And if you like the proposals that we received and you want to move forward, at that point, you will authorize the award of that RFP, and then we'll move forward to contract. So it's just like electricity supply, just for a different product or a different offering. And again, really important, so regulatory restrictions have prevented CCAs in New York from including HEAP participants in the electricity supply programs, very unfortunately, in the sense that some of the regulatory protections for low-income customers also exclude them from programs like CCA. Not the case for community solar. So community solar, all eligible customers, including HEAP customers, will be enrolled unless they opt out. The only groups of customers that are ineligible by definition are those that have solar on their roof or are already part of another community solar project. So you can only have, as Jeff said, you can only have one solar deal with Central Hudson, essentially. but those that have an ESCO for electricity supply, which would otherwise be ineligible for the electricity supply portion of CCA, are eligible for community solar, as are, as I mentioned, HEAP participants as well.
So now, to just wrap up, just the next steps. It's really a review of what Glenn's already talked about, but these are the two next steps. So please do invite us to present at the next board meeting. There's good topics that we want to discuss with you, and including some of the details on a per community basis, and then passing the renewal resolution or resolutions that Glenn had just described. So please take away that these are the steps to prioritize, and we look forward to digging in more with you to move things forward. And then finally, just to put our information back up so you can ask us questions, as this is a recording. Here again, identified with my team, my helpline team, is our cca@hudsonvalleyenergy.org email. The program hotline is at the top, and Glenn's information is at the bottom. So thank you so much for paying attention to this presentation. Glenn, any closing thoughts before we say goodbye?
No, just and thanks for listening, and please do reach out to us. We will be reaching out to you as well, but please do reach out to us and get us on your next agenda, because we are now in full swing in renewal mode, and we want to move fairly swiftly through the process so that we make sure we have plenty of time to get everything we need to get done. So thanks again, and look forward to continuing the conversation with each of you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Glenn, and thank you all.